The morning crowd poured out of Grand Central Station like a tidal wave of tired suits, earbuds, and takeaway coffee. Manhattan's rhythm was sharp and unrelenting. Heels clicked, horns blared, and voices competed with the city's pulse. And yet, sitting cross-legged on a tattered blanket near the corner of 42nd Street and Vanderbilt Avenue was a man who had learned to live in the silence between all the noise. His name, at least the one people used, was Benjamin. A woolen beanie covered his graying hair, and a scruffy beard hid most of his weathered face. He wore an old brown coat, patched at the elbows, with gloves that had the fingers cut out. His cardboard sign rested against an overturned milk crate. "Need nothing but a moment of your time. Let me listen to your story." At first, people thought it was a joke, a gimmick. No request for money, no homeless vet or need food claim, just time. Most people ignored him. Some chuckled, others threw coins in his cup anyway. But occasionally, just occasionally, someone stopped. The first person who did was a young man named Dylan, who sat beside Benjamin one rainy afternoon after missing his train. He had just been laid off from his job at a startup and had no idea how to tell his pregnant wife. Benjamin didn't say much, just nodded, asked a few questions, and then, with surprising clarity, said, "You lost a job, not your worth. You can start again, but only if you stop believing that title made you who you were." Dylan left quietly, wiping his eyes. 2 years later, he returned with a suit, a fresh smile, and a toddler in tow. He left a coffee beside Benjamin and said, "You were right. Thank you." Word spread slowly, like secrets do. A middle-aged woman named Karen came next, battling a divorce and the guilt of having lost herself in a 20-year marriage. Benjamin listened like no therapist ever had. Then he told her, "You don't have to rewrite the whole book. Just start a new chapter. You're the author." Karen didn't cry right away. She came back weeks later and said she'd started her own floral business, something she had always dreamed of but was too scared to try. It wasn't booming, but she was happy, alive. Benjamin never took credit. He never asked for thanks or money. He sat in that same spot 6 days a week and simply offered something few people in the world ever receive: pure attention. But who was this man? That question haunted one particular journalist named Claire Henderson, a rising star at the Manhattan Voice. She had passed by Benjamin hundreds of times but never stopped, not until her world collapsed. Her mother passed away from cancer, her longtime boyfriend left, and her editor threatened to fire her for missing a major deadline. With no one left to turn to, she sat down on that worn blanket and whispered, "I don't even know who I am anymore." Benjamin didn't rush to answer. He just asked, "Who were you before the world told you who you had to be?" It was such a simple question, but it gutted her. She came back the next day and the next, each time peeling away layers of herself she didn't even know existed. Claire felt lighter, stronger. She started writing again, not the clickbait she'd been forced into, but real, heartfelt stories. She wanted to tell Benjamin's story, but every time she asked, he refused. "I'm no story," he would say with a half smile. "I'm just the pause between others' sentences." That wasn't good enough for Claire, so she started digging. What she found shocked her. Benjamin was actually Daniel Price, once a Wall Street wizard known for building one of the most successful hedge funds of the early 2000s. Forbes had done a cover story on him in 2008, calling him the young oracle of Midtown. He was worth over $300 million at his peak. He owned yachts, penthouses, and even a private art collection. But it all vanished in a flash. In 2011, a deal he greenlit turned into a scandal. Not fraud, just catastrophic miscalculation. His fund collapsed. Investors pulled out. Lawsuits followed. He wasn't jailed, but he was vilified. Headlines labeled him reckless, arrogant, and the face of unchecked ambition. Daniel disappeared. People assumed he'd moved abroad, maybe gone off the grid. But he hadn't. He had wandered the streets for weeks after the collapse, too ashamed to face his family, too proud to ask for help. He had tried starting over, but every door was closed, every whisper behind his back a reminder of the man he used to be. Then, one evening in Central Park, he watched a street performer recite poetry to a group of strangers. The crowd smiled, laughed, cried, and Daniel realized something. Money wasn't the only currency. Connection, presence, truth, these were priceless. He began speaking with homeless shelters, volunteering in kitchens, sitting beside addicts and war vets. He learned to listen, not as a tactic, but as an offering. Eventually, he gave away the last of his assets, quietly, through anonymous donations and small charities. He kept enough for food and supplies and started living like the people he had once ignored. The Invisibles. Daniel reinvented himself as Benjamin, and the world let him. When Claire uncovered the truth, she confronted him one cold December morning. "You were Daniel Price." He smiled. That same quiet smile. "I was. But why live like this? You could have written a book, done a TED Talk, built a redemption story. Why, this?" Benjamin looked around. The sky was gray, the streets wet. A young man walked past, sobbing into his phone. A woman held a child in one arm and a resume in the other. A man in a suit stared blankly into a cab window, clearly miles away in his thoughts. "Because here," he said softly, "I matter." Claire didn't know what to do with that. Part of her wanted to publish everything. This was the story of the year. But another part of her, the part that had sat on this sidewalk just months earlier, knew better. So she waited. Then, one spring morning, Benjamin didn't show up. Not that day, not the next, or the one after that. Panic spread through the few who knew him. Claire searched hospitals, shelters, even the morgue. Days turned into weeks. There was no trace, no goodbye. But then envelopes started arriving. One went to Dylan, the man who had lost his job. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note that read, "Keep helping others. You're good at it." Another went to Karen, the florist. Hers contained a lease for a larger shop, fully paid for 2 years, and a note. "You blossomed. Now bloom bigger." Claire received a single letter. No money, just words. "You were never supposed to write my story. You were supposed to live yours. If you want to thank me, find someone else to sit with. Listen, that's all I ever did. And it was enough." She never published the article. Instead, she started a small column called The Quiet Ones, profiling people who made big impacts in small ways. It became the most read section of the paper. Years passed, rumors floated. Someone saw Benjamin in Chicago, another claimed he was living on a boat in Oregon. But nothing was ever confirmed. He became a legend, a whisper of wisdom passed between strangers on hard days, and every now and then in the chaos of a morning commute, someone would stop beside a man on the sidewalk, tell him their story, and walk away a little lighter. Not because he solved their problems, not because he gave them money, but because he made them feel seen. Because sometimes the richest people in the world are the ones who have nothing left to prove and everything left to give.